In a world, a global leadership looks like in a world. What does it really look like where strength is scrutinized, alliances are tested, and the very systems built to protect us sometimes break beneath us? Well, this afternoon, from the war zones of Eastern Europe to diplomatic showdowns in Washington and crises unfolding across continents, the world faces a moment defined not just by conflict or collapse, but by the echoes and the choices that follow. The United States tightens its grip on foreign policy while confronting storms at home. Allies and adversaries alike are learning that in this era, clarity is power, and silence is no longer neutral. The war in Ukraine has intensified sharply this week following back-to-back aerial offensives by Russia, including the largest drone assault since the invasion began. The attacks come just hours after the United States President Donald Trump pledges increased military support for Kyiv, while accusing Russian President Vladimir Putin of undermining peace negotiations. Now, with diplomacy hanging in the balance and Washington tightening pressure, this afternoon's segment examines the latest battlefield development and the high-stakes diplomatic maneuvering now underway. Well, this is the Flash News, where every headline echoes a deeper question about who holds the reins of accountability and who dares to stare. I am Star Smart. Let's begin. Ukrainian officials confirmed that Russia launched 728 drones and 13 missiles in a massive overnight aerial campaign, surpassing the previous record of 539 drones set just days earlier on July 4th. The Ukrainian Air Force reported that the bulk of the drones were intercepted, limiting widespread damage, but local authorities in districts confirmed that one civilian was killed after debris from a Shahed drone struck a residential area. President Volodymyr Zelensky condemned the attack as pure terrorism, but then Russia claimed it was targeting military infrastructure in Kyiv, a claim Ukraine and its allies dispute, citing the continued impact on civilian areas. The attack followed an address by President Donald Trump, who earlier on Wednesday pledged expanded United States military assistance to Ukraine and harshly criticized President Putin's unwillingness to engage in meaningful peace talk. While speaking to reporters, Trump made it known that peace was the goal and not games with Putin. The remark signals a hardened U.S. posture, even as Trump continues to promote a doctrine of peace through strength, asserting that firm American leadership can bring both sides to the table. But right now, President Trump is not happy at all with Putin. Let's take a listen.
We're dealing with him now too. We're not happy with Putin. I'm not happy with Putin. I can tell you that much right now, because he's killing a lot of people. And a lot of them are his soldiers and their soldiers, mostly. And it's now up to 7,000 a week. And I'm not happy with Putin. We want to put defensive weapons because Putin is not treating human beings right. He's killing too many people. So we're sending some defensive weapons to Ukraine, and I've approved that.
Well, on Capitol Hill, a bipartisan sanctions bill targeting Russia is rapidly gaining support in the Senate. The proposed legislation seeks to strengthen economic restrictions on Moscow, particularly its energy revenues and access to Western financial systems. But behind the scenes, Republican lawmakers are treading carefully, aiming to ensure that the legislation complements rather than contradicts President Trump's foreign policy approach. Now, when asked about it by the press, Here's what President Trump had to say, and this is courtesy of CNN.
Lindsey Graham has a sanctions bill on Russia. Do you want him to move ahead with that?
I'm looking at it, yeah, no, I'm looking. The Senate is passing and passed a very, very tough sanctions bill. Yeah, I'm looking at it.
Can you sign that?
It's an optional bill. It's totally at my option. They passed it totally at my option.
Oh, well, with no formal statement has been issued by the White House on the bill. Several senators have expressed confidence that it aligns with the president's broader framework, pressuring Putin without abandoning potential diplomatic avenues. Now, observers note this mirrors Trump's consistent messaging, using leverage to force talks, not to provoke escalation. Well, still with the issue on Ukraine, we see that Secretary Rubio heads to Geneva as Trump presses Moscow on empty posturing. The United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio is set to meet with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on Thursday in Geneva. Now, according to a senior State Department official, the meeting follows days of intensified military aggression and renewed diplomatic breakdowns, and it comes as President Trump publicly voiced his growing frustration with Putin's lack of engagement in constructive peace efforts. Now, speaking earlier this week, Trump accused his Russian counterpart of prolonging the war through posturing, stating it's all talk, no action. He doesn't want peace, he wants power. Now, while the State Department has not released Rubio's full agenda, sources familiar with the Geneva meeting say that the United States delegation will push for immediate de-escalation and a pathway to talks conditioned on halting further strikes on civilian infrastructure. Well, on Wednesday night, it marked the second consecutive night of aerial strikes on Kyiv as Russian forces pounded Ukrainian capital with drones and cruise missiles. Ukrainian defense systems intercepted a majority of the projectiles, but some made impact, sparking fires and damaging residential areas. Air raid sirens rang out for over 4 hours. Explosion lit the sky, deepening fears of a renewed offensive wave. Now, with Russian aggression escalating and peace talks stalling, many in the international community are only left to ask, why is the fight so important to Putin? Is this about NATO's expansion, securing influence in the region, or is it, as some analysts suggest, a desperate effort to assert relevance on a global stage, slipping beyond Moscow's reach? While the answers remain contested, what is clear is that Washington's posture has shifted. Under Trump, the United States is signaling less tolerance for diplomatic theater and more readiness to back Ukraine with both strength and strategy. For President Vladimir Zelensky, in his latest address, Volodymyr Zelensky issued a warning to allies. Every delay, every hesitation is a gift to terror. The only way to stop Russia is together now. Well, as Kyiv burns and Washington tightens, it stands. The path to peace seems both distant and urgent. But then with Secretary Rubio heading into high-stakes talk and sanctions looming, all eyes now turn to Geneva and to whether strength will finally force sincerity to the table. Well, still on the war in Ukraine, we're seeing a surprising development that sent ripples through Washington's national security circles. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth reportedly paused weapons shipment to Ukraine last week without prior approval from the White House. Now, multiple administration sources confirmed that the decision triggered confusion amongst Trump aides who were unaware of the move until after the fact. The delay forced immediate briefing with Congress and Ukrainian officials, raising questions about procedural clarity and chain of command within the current administration. Now, while the shipments have since resumed, analysts say the incidents reveal potential friction between operational authority and executive oversight, especially during wartime. We wonder if internal communication breakdowns at the highest levels of defense, if they could actually erode confidence in America's commitment abroad. Well, away from the war in Ukraine and on to Israel, the United States has imposed sanctions on a senior United Nations human rights official who has been publicly critical of Israel's military actions in Gaza. The move announced by Secretary of State Marco Rubio marks a significant escalation in the Trump administration's efforts to hold international bodies accountable for what it calls institutional bias against democratic allies. Now, the targeted official has faced mounting criticism for language and reports perceived by United States and Israeli diplomats as one-sided and inflammatory. By targeting a high-ranking UN rapporteur, the administration is sending a clear signal that perceived neutrality no longer protects global actors from consequences. This action is part of a broader campaign to reassert the United States' influence in multilateral institutions long accused of favoring anti-Western narratives. Well, over to the United States. In a policy shift designed to streamline air travel, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem has announced the immediate termination of the TSA's decade-old shoe removal requirement at airports. The rule, implemented after a 2001 terror threat, has long symbolized post-9/11 vigilance, but also frustration amongst travelers. The rollback comes amid broader administrative efforts to eliminate outdated security protocols in favor of smarter, tech-driven systems. For many Americans, this change represents a restoration of common sense in travel security and a step away from reactive bureaucracy. It's also a reflection of a Trump-era governing style, which is decisive, pragmatic, and focused on outcomes rather than optics. Now with Trump, it taps Sean Duffy to serve as interim NASA administrator. President Trump has appointed former Congressman Sean Duffy as the interim head of NASA. The move signals a renewed White House focus on space innovation and technological competition, particularly with China. Duffy's temporary appointment is expected to emphasize private sector partnerships, accelerated development timelines, and restoring American leadership in manned spaceflight. Now, while critics question the political nature of the choice, supporters argue that a bold and accountable leadership style is exactly what NASA needs as it enters a new era of geopolitical space competition. The decision comes at a time when national defense, aerospace technology, and energy independence are increasingly linked, and the White House appears determined to keep space policy firmly aligned with broader strategic goals as well. Still with the U.S., over to the NYC mayoral controversy. We see in New York City's charged mayoral race, we see controversy erupting around socialist candidate Zoran Mamdani after past college writings resurfaced, highlighting his support for the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against Israel, and reflections on white privilege and systemic inequality. Now, while Mamdani's campaign argues the pieces reflect academic curiosity, political observers say the content reveals deeper ideological positions that could alienate moderate voters away. Now, here's something Trump wasn't also happy about, which sparked more controversy when the subject of deportation was brought into play. Here is an exchange at different intervals from both parties, President Trump and Zoran Mamdani.
New York, they're trying to elect a communist, Zoran Mamdani, the guy who wants to defund the police, take over the stores and run the stores and have the people hand out goods. And when everything falls apart, it always does. It always works that way. It never has worked any other way. Anarchy and dictatorships prevail. This guy is a communist at the highest level, and he wants to destroy New York. I love New York, and we're not going to let him do that.
He said that I should be deported. He said that I should be denaturalized. And he said those things about me, someone who stands to be the first immigrant mayor of this city in generations, someone who would also be the first Muslim and the first South Asian mayor in this city's history. And more so because he wants to distract from what I fight for. I fight for working people. I fight for the very people that have been priced out of this city, and I fight for the same people that he said he was fighting for.
Well, the resurfaced articles uncovered by conservative media have become a flashpoint for broader concerns about the rise of far-left extremism in the United States politics, particularly in heavily democratic urban areas. Now, can a city still recovering from years of crisis afford leadership that is shaped more by activist identity more than pragmatic governance is the question. But then from national defense to airport policy, global diplomacy to urban elections, the undercurrents of American politics today tell a story of power recalibrated, priorities refocused, and principles tested. As institutions shift under new leadership, the question for the electorate becomes not just who governs, but how they govern. Well, in Israel's war, we see the Trump administration is standing firmly behind its nominee for the office of special counsel, 30-year-old attorney Paul Ngresia. Though the nominee has faced sharp criticism in media outlets for past comments described as racially insensitive and for alleged association with individuals known for Holocaust denial. The White House has emphasized his professional qualifications and legal record as the basis for the nomination. In response to controversy, administration officials have pointed to support from several Jewish groups, underscoring that community backing is not monolithic and suggesting that opposition to the nominee may be politically driven. The decision to proceed reflects the administration's continued posture that policy performance outweighs optics, especially in an era of growing institutional scrutiny. The confirmation fight is shaping up to be a larger test, not just of character vetting, but of how far ideological disagreements can influence public service appointments. Well, in the war in Gaza, hope for a ceasefire appears to be gaining momentum as Israel's military leadership signals that key conditions for a pause in hostilities may now be in place. The development follows intensified diplomatic activity by the White House, which has been engaging regional stakeholders in what sources described as a concerted push towards de-escalation. Israel's defense posture remains uncompromising, particularly in areas where Hamas and other militant factions remain active. However, progress in humanitarian corridors, intelligence coordination, and indirect messaging between parties has reportedly narrowed the gap towards temporary calm. The Trump administration has indicated optimism about the timeline for resolution while reaffirming its support for Israel's security priorities. Negotiations remain delicate, but international monitors say the convergence between the United States leadership and Israeli readiness suggests that a truce may no longer be out of reach. But then in the Red Sea, a commercial cargo ship has been attacked by Houthi militants, leaving at least 3 crew members dead and several others rescued in a coordinated naval response. The ship, flagged under an international charter, was targeted near the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, a strategic choke point for global maritime trade. The assault is the latest in a string of regional disruptions widely seen as proxy actions linked to Iran's influence in Yemen. The United States allies have raised alarms about Tehran's growing reach in maritime security threats, which now routinely extends beyond local conflict and into critical trade routes that impact the global economy. With multiple armed factions operating under ideological banners backed by state actors, questions are intensified over whether the Red Sea, once seen primarily as a trade corridor, is fast becoming another front in the broader Iran-Israel power contest. Well, in Europe, a newly published parliamentary report has warned that Iran poses a persistent, wide-ranging, and unpredictable threat to the United Kingdom. The findings come from an intelligence and security cyber activity assassination. We see that committee review that cites Iranian cyber activity, assassination plots, and support for militant proxies across the Middle East and Europe as part of a broad and sustained strategy to undermine Western interests. Now, British analysts describe Iran's foreign policy behavior as increasingly aggressive, with direct implication for both European national security and transatlantic coordination. The report notes that Tehran's use of asymmetric tactics, including digital espionage and ideological influence operations, makes it difficult to anticipate or counter with conventional strategies. But then as tensions rise, United States policymakers are closely watching how European partners respond, especially amid renewed American efforts to consolidate regional deterrence through both diplomatic and military channels. From the battlefield of Gaza to the corridors of Parliament in London, one adversary's shadows seem to stretch across every front. If Iran's reach can destabilize shipping lanes, empower militant groups, and infiltrate digital infrastructure all at once, is the world still measuring the threat by yesterday's standards? Well, over to the United States international relations. We'll take a look at this video first.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for being with us today. And I want to thank you, all of these great leaders, for joining us as we welcome to the White House the presidents and prime ministers and various other forms of dignitary to this wonderful place. Is nothing like the White House to me. We are represented today, and your continent is represented by Gabon, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Mauritania, and Senegal, all very vibrant places with very valuable land, great minerals, great oil deposits, and wonderful people. Last month, the U.S.
And that's how President Donald Trump started his targeted summit with leaders from 5 African nations, a forum notably smaller than past United States-African gathering, but with far sharper intent. Though as we established, only 5 African nations were invited to participate in this closed-door engagement, sparking both criticism and curiosity across diplomatic circles. While some commentators have pointed to the limited invite list as a slight against the continent, administration insiders say the decision reflects a shift towards results-driven diplomacy, emphasizing strategic alliances, shared security priorities, and economic ties over symbolism and mass optics. During one session, Trump offered a personal compliment to Liberian President Joseph Boakai about how well he spoke. Take a listen.
And also, we want to encourage American involvement in the investment in Liberia. Yeah. We'd like to see that happen. We want to work with the United States in peace and security within the region, because we are committed to that. And we just want to thank you so much for this opportunity.
Well, thank you. And such good English, such beautiful. Where did you learn to speak so beautifully? Where were you educated? Where?
Yes, sir.
In Liberia.
Yes, sir.
Well, that's very interesting. It's beautiful English.
Sure.
I have people at this table can't speak nearly as well,
Very
and
good, sir. Thank you.
they come from.
That was an interesting question, but then that was a question that caused quite a controversy. This is the moment that generated controversy. That question, where did you learn to speak so well? But then the White House later clarified it was an expression of respect. While officials framed the summit as an evolution in the United States-Africa relations, focused more on meaningful policy alignment than performative inclusivity. Now, for the administration, the message is clear. Substance now takes precedence over ceremony in the reshaping of global partnerships. Well, tensions have escalated between the United States and Brazil as President Trump threatened to impose a 50% tariff on Brazilian exports if legal proceedings against former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro are not reconsidered. The United States administration has characterized the ongoing prosecution as politically motivated, drawing comparisons to so-called deep state tactics Trump has long condemned domestically. The potential trade action signals a broader shift in American foreign policy under Trump's leadership, where economic leverage is used to protect ideological allies and resist what the administration sees as authoritarian overreach, disguised as lawfare. Now, the Brazilian judiciary maintains the independence and legal merit of the proceedings. But Washington's warning has injected a geopolitical layer into what had previously been viewed as a national matter. Regional analysts warns that deteriorating trust between the two countries could reverberate across Latin America, particularly amongst right-wing coalitions that see Trump as a symbolic ally. But then in a move that underscores the administration's alignment with Israel and its intolerance for institutional bias, we see that the United States is not just in the business of Brazil, but also it issued sanctions against Francesca Albanese, a special rapporteur for the United Nations Human Rights Council. Albanese has drawn global attention and sharp criticism for her vocal opposition to Israel's military operations in Gaza. The sanctions are being framed as a response to repeated violations of neutrality by international officials, whom the administration believes are inflaming regional tensions under the guise of human rights advocacy. Now, critics argue that the sanction sets a dangerous precedent, while supporters only view it as a long overdue correction of one-sided narratives embedded within global institutions. Officials within the administration describe the move as a reaffirmation of the United States leadership in protecting its allies and rejecting platforms that are seen as politicized rather than principled. Well, we see that from Africa's quiet corridors to Brazil courthouses and the halls of the United Nations, a new diplomatic doctrine is taking hold, one built not on consensus, but on clarity. If results now define international respect, we wonder what happens to the institutions built on consensus that never actually delivered it. But then across the rest of the globe, we see the ex-CEO resigning amid fallout from anti-Semitic AI inputs. In a sudden and closely watched leadership shift, we see Linda Yaccarino has resigned as CEO of X just 2 years after joining Elon Musk's social media platform. Her departure follows a surge of controversy after the company's artificial intelligence tool, Grok, began generating responses widely condemned for promoting anti-Semitic tropes.
The foundation of X is based on free expression and freedom of speech. Everyone deserves to have that opportunity to speak their opinion, no matter who they are.
Well, while the company has not officially linked Yaccarino's exit to the AI scandal, the timing just 1 day after the incident has raised questions across both the tech and civil rights communities. The controversy came on the heels of Musk's decision to formally merge X with his artificial intelligence firm xAI. The consolidation blurred the lines between content, governance, and algorithmic responsibility, particularly as Grok's integration into the platform expanded. Now, advocacy groups and some Trump-aligned figures have called for stronger oversight of AI platforms, especially those operating on public communications network. As AI-driven content becomes more influential and less predictable, one critical question emerges. If algorithms can now speak for corporations, who ultimately answers for the consequences? Well, away from AI, we see Texas flooding. What is happening right now? Well, in the United States, the death toll continues to rise following the devastating flash flood that took place in Texas, where entire communities were overwhelmed by torrential rains and rapidly rising waters. And among the deceased were children. Staff from Camp Mystic, a beloved summer retreat with grandparents, teachers, and dozens of other residents caught off guard by the flood disaster. Now, local responders continue to search and recover. Recovery effort is hard hit counties, with federal officials providing aid through emergency declarations. The flooding, fueled by record rainfall and unstable weather systems, has reignited urgent debates over climate resilience emergency preparedness and infrastructure readiness in vulnerable zones. While the Trump administration has directed agencies to review national flood response frameworks, particularly in rural and underfunded regions. But then beyond the policy, the human cost is staggering. As grief grips affected families, the brother nation must grapple with a painful truth. How many more lives must be lost before prevention becomes as urgent as the response? Well, over to India. In western Gujarat state, India, at least 9 people were killed after a bridge spanning a river gave way without warning. The collapse occurred during regular use, plunging pedestrians and commuters into the water below. Rescue operations are ongoing and local officials have launched an investigation into the structure's condition prior to the failure. India has faced several such tragedies in recent years and often linked to aging public works and inconsistent oversight. The latest incident has sparked renewed scrutiny over infrastructure investment in developing nations, where rapid urban growth often outpaces structural maintenance. The global development community has increasingly highlighted the risk of infrastructure collapse as a human security issue, not just an engineering one. And so the global question returns again and again. What good is economic growth if the foundations it rests on are crumbling beneath people's feet? From social media networks under pressure to city on the water and bridges collapsing, the fault lines of the modern world are not just political, they are structural, technological, and deeply human. And as global leaders respond, the cost of inaction becomes clearer with every single headline. And this is where we draw the curtains on today's Flash News to a close. Do not forget to tune into Undaunted coming up at 8 p.m. Amber time. Thank you for joining in. Stay safe and have a great day.